In 2019, when I gave my first TED talk, I predicted a future where air wouldn't be free to breathe. I just didn't know that I was predicting my future and how soon it would be hitting home. My father was sitting right there in the audience. In July 2020, during the first wave of COVID, I, like many, was struggling to find my father an ICU bed with a ventilator. We used all our contacts and connections, and yet we found it to be a monumental task to find a war veteran, a hero brigadier, a hospital with a supply of oxygen. My mother was isolated, I was isolated, we couldn't even go and visit him until his last day. How do we know when it's someone's last day until it was their last day? On that day, I was allowed to meet him, just me. My mother wasn't allowed, she had to wait outside the hospital. I went in wearing 2 masks, a PPE suit, gloves, taped and sealed my hands, a head mask, a face shield, to the point that only my eyes were visible. Everything else masked for protection. I went into the ICU, and a place with white light, machines beeping, patients coughing. It's a strange time capsule, this ICU. No night or day, just a constant loop. Many like myself in PPE suits, differentiated only by our heights and eyes. My father lay there on the bed, a fraction of himself, eyes closed, breathing heavily. He was wearing a mask, a ventilator aiding him in his breathing. I came up next to his bed, gently touched him. He didn't wake up. The doctor came onto his other side, clinically shook him awake. He opened his eyes, looked into mine, and lunged up towards me. Despite all the masks that I wore, he still recognized me. See, parents have this instinct to look beyond the masks that we wear. He conversed with hand gestures because he had the ventilator on. This loud machine kept me from hearing his last words. 9 months later, April of 2021, between the 2 lockdowns, I find myself driving solo on top of a mountain pass. It had snowed heavily the day before. The pass was said to have been cut off. So I went to see for myself where it was said to be cut off. So I drove and drove for 2 hours, covering only 16 kilometers, until I found myself 2 kilometers short of the summit. There was ice all around, black ice on the road. My car was slipping, but the 4x4 held strong. And I carried on those last 2 kilometers, knowing that if something was to happen to me, no one would be coming by for the next 3 days to help or rescue. A feeling of fear, excitement, exhilaration, anxiety, fear again, all of them cocktailing into an overwhelming feeling came over me, and I burst out crying. I was bawling in tears. I didn't know what I was crying about. I didn't need to know. I just felt, and I let go. I cried until I reached the summit. I got out of the car, and it seemed like that I'd reached the top of the world. And suddenly it struck me that I haven't seen a vehicle go past or go by. The mountain was said to be cut off for the next 3 days. There was nobody on that mountain, not a bird in sight. And that's when I really let go. I cried like never before. See, I grew up in an army background where the narrative was that boys don't cry. I grew out of that narrative when I became an actor and was encouraged to cry and make others cry. So I thought I was very familiar and comfortable with this primal, beautiful emotion of crying. Until that day, when I was all alone on a mountaintop, and I let go. I screamed my pain away, I howled the weight away until I broke out into laughter. It was crazy, I felt crazy, but I felt light too. I felt unburdened, a catharsis had just happened. For the first time, I was all by myself, and that's rare in India. I was all by myself. I was myself. There was nobody around me to be a certain way, to be any way. So I unmasked myself. And that's when it happened. I heard a laugh. It was my father's laugh. I connected with him then. I checked in with him. And I had that conversation with him that I couldn't in the ICU. On my way back down from the mountain, I passed this most tranquil, peaceful forest with no sound or shine of human presence. I was now listening without any filters, breathing without any masks, just being light and almost floating. I took out my drone and I flew it in the forest. See, as a drone pilot, I become one with the drone. Flying through the forest, the camera becomes my eyes. I'm there flying, and when I return home, I see my body in the same frame in real time. It's this out-of-body experience, this really deep spiritual feeling which comes over. Hey. And that's when it hit me. The conversation I just had with my father, it wasn't his soul flying around waiting for me to be at 12,300 feet up on a mountain all alone to access him. No, he was and always has been right there inside of me. See, he left his imprint within me. I just couldn't access him. Maybe because of all the metaphorical masks I wore. But just with this perception shift, I could access him now. Anytime, anywhere. My conversations with him now are a lot faster than when he was alive. There's no waiting or buffering time. In a strange way, he again saw through all the masks that I wore. I got back into the car. I was processing all that had just happened, and I realized that the catharsis that I just went through, when I just let go of all these masks that I was wearing of bravado, of responsibility, of courage, when I had the courage to be vulnerable and open and authentic to myself, basically when I unmasked myself, I had this deep spiritual experience, this realization that the biggest loss of my life turned out to be a step forward in the evolution of myself. See, I always struggled with clarity. I was indecisive, from the small decisions to the big ones. I could never come to a decision confidently, clearly. But enduring the greatest loss of my life shattered me and shattered all the masks that I wore. And when I started picking myself back up again with the realizations that there were parts of me that I don't resonate with anymore, that being a certain way was just a waste of valuable time, time which is limited for us all. Because how do we know it's our last day until it is our last day? Gautam Buddha says, the way to nirvana is to know thyself. These masks that we wear to protect ourselves, this pretense we put on to put across an image that no one can mess with me or take me for a ride, it's great. It helps, it's needed most of the times, but in the process of that, I forgot to take my masks off. I forgot to be vulnerable, to be true to myself. I did not know myself because I wore all these different masks for the different roles I played, not just in my acting career, but in my life too. I played the responsible son, I played the ideal husband, I wore the mask of courage and confidence when I faced a camera or presented in front of a crowd, this tool needed for that time, but I forgot to take off these masks when I was alone or with trusted friends. Because I started believing that that mask was me and not a tool that I should use from time to time to aid me. That same tool had become a wall that restricted me from clarity. It takes a monumental event in one's life that makes one stop and remove all these masks that I put on along the way of life. COVID, helplessly finding oxygen for my father, not being with him during his last few breaths, not being able to see him during his last rites because he was wrapped in an opaque plastic, sealed in a body bag and pushed into electric crematorium, was that monumental moment for me that made me stop, breathe, and then accept a new direction of life. I share these intimate, difficult memories with you because I've realized that honesty is a tool that I can use to unmask myself. Another tool that works for me is solo travel. See, I do believe if travel is education, then adventure travel is higher education. In this form of higher education, of solo traveling, I'm vulnerable to the world, and most of the times I am humbled by the situations I find myself in. And the plans that don't work out to be better than I could have planned it myself. Being humbled allows me to take off the masks of ego, of pride, of being closed and unreceptive, and just opens me up, lightens my load. Because when I don't wear a mask, I am open, I'm vulnerable, I feel lighter, I feel liberated, I feel connected, I feel authentic. Things make sense to me, and things that don't, I say I don't know the answer and I need help in finding it. And help does come. Help comes in a similar, authentic, honest way, and a connection is made that's pure, that's honest, that's special, that's beautiful. All this happened to me once I started taking off these metaphorical masks I was wearing, these masks that I forgot to take off because life seemed like it needed me to wear it all the time. I realized that from time to time I need to check in with myself without the masks. Because then conversations with myself become richer. Conversation with others become richer. Less bullshit comes out, more bullseyes go in. So, unlearn, unveil, unwind, unlink, unplug, unleash, unsettle, understand, and unmask. From a motorcycle monk. You live just once, but if you live it right, once is enough.